This is all about adding gold over an existing painting. First, we're going to create the painting, and to do that I painted over something I didn't care for. I painted over it in white, but I let some of the underpainting show through, and now I'm just adding vertical strokes of raw umber and spritzing it with water to start to create kind of a landscape vibe here, a wooded scene, and spritzing water at the top of the freshly painted section so that the drips will roll down toward the bottom of the canvas and give that luscious drippy vibe that I always try to go for. And then to soften some of the top of the trees, if you will, slightly damp paper towel and just patting it, dabbing it, and kind of dragging it wherever I feel it needs to be. This is the composition part. You see me kind of checking back and looking at it and wiping here and wiping there, and then suddenly feeling like we need a little balance on this side of the canvas. So I use some of the same strokes, the up and down movement, using the raw umber, and a little more dabbing with the paper towel. I like to darken the edges of my paintings. I don't know, somehow it feels to me like it frames the piece. So you'll always notice that I have darker sections on either side of the painting. The brush is actually not very wet. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of a dry brush, so it catches on the pre-textured canvas. Remember, it's textured because I had painted over something I didn't care for. Some of my best work, I mentioned this in previous videos, comes from paint overs. Some people like to go in, some artists like to go in and mark their canvases up in the beginning, scribble all over them. That's awesome. I haven't tried that yet. For me, I almost always do a paint over, so it's kind of like been scribbled on already. It is very freeing. Staring at a completely brand new, unwrapped, stretched canvas can be intimidating, especially if you're experimenting, which is what I do a lot of. Trying, well, what if I did this? And trying, well, what if I did that? So sometimes it's a little more freeing if there's a pre-existing painting to paint over. It kind of gives you license, creative license to go, well, what the heck? I just want to see how this turns out. And that liberation is it's very exciting, and it's very freeing, and gives you permission to have fun. And I know we always say, you'll hear many artists say, it's important to have fun. It's so hard to have fun when you're learning and you're going, how do I do this? Oh, dang, it didn't turn out. Well, we have to learn to say, it's good that it didn't turn out, because now I know, A, I'll never do that again, or maybe if I adjust it this way or adjust it that way, I can make it turn out. It's kind of like when you're cooking and you're tasting your food as you go along, preparing, and suddenly you say, I could use a little more of this or a little more of that. That comes with experience, and it also, it's creation on the fly, which is my favorite thing, because I never know what I'm going to get. I do have an idea, like with this particular one, part of the Margarita Sunrise series, I did have a sense of what it was going to be like. I'm illustrating or demonstrating it here because I had a lot of people DM me, direct message me on Instagram and say, could you show me how you create those? And I'm not giving step-by-step instruction. I'm hoping that someday I'll have a course where I can really get into it in depth. But in the meantime, for those of you that are anxious to give it a shot, this will give you an idea of how to go about it. Darkening the edges again. So I'm thinking about those old sepia photographs, the kind of a brown and white photograph, kind of antique photographs, and they have kind of the darkened edges. I may have been influenced by that. I'm influenced by a lot of work. I'll see stuff on Instagram and I'll think, I wonder if I could create that. And I try it, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it's completely exciting and different. And so this is an old dry foam brush. I do kind of wipe the paint out of them. I try not to rinse them down the sink after I've used them, but I'll wipe the paint out of them, and sometimes they get a little bit crusty, but that's okay. If they're not too crusty, they're really useful. In this case, I dipped it in a little bit of black and started to use it to darken some of the underbush. Now, the paint started to peel away in this section. I thought you might find this really interesting. It didn't scare me. I didn't think it was ruined. I didn't throw the canvas out. Instead, I grabbed my jar of gloss gel medium, which I have for all different brands. I usually get them on sale. And I'm repairing the painting by using a small palette knife to glue down the parts of the paint that are peeling up. And I'm going to let that dry. That takes about an hour to dry. So in the meantime, I decided to jump on top and build up my classic white skyline, pulling down some of the paint into the wooded area now, starting to carve out what I think it might look like. It's always fun to spritz over the white because you can see it starts to create kind of nice transparent drips. And so here I am. The drips are going wherever they want. I don't always correct them. Sometimes I go back in with a smaller brush and kind of train the drip to follow the path I really want it to follow. But mostly, I just let it happen. So painting up, and then every now and then sort of swinging my head back to check. At this point I remember thinking I still don't really know where this one's going. Playing and knowing that it's a demonstration for YouTube while I'm painting it gives me the freedom to, I shouldn't say freedom, it's a luxury for me to show you some of the techniques that I use. Not with the full intent of creating a masterpiece. And so, yeah, I wanted you to see. By the way, I don't show it, but in between each section of applying paint, I do grab the hairdryer and dry the layers. So I would have dried, for example, that white layer that I just laid down. That would have been dried with the hairdryer. It's sitting there somewhere on that tabouret. Okay, I had some leftover Waverly, like latex house paint because I liked the color. Picked it up years ago. It's kind of thick in the bottle now, but it's still usable. And I decided to add some of the green, and it kind of blends in with the raw umber and black. And you see, it just gives a little bit of tonality, so the piece doesn't look too black and white. Could have used blue, but I chose to use that green, and it's kind of dry, so I see I'm spritzing it a little bit. Just little bits of spritz here and there, not big splashes of water, just enough to kind of wetten the paint that's on there, and so that you're able to pull it down. And some of the wet sections, I want it to dry a little more quickly, and I want it to rub off some of the paint. So here I am, paper toweling off. Removing painted areas is just as exciting as applying paint. There's a little more blending going on with the paper towel. Early in the morning here right now, having my first cup of coffee, and I have to work early in the morning to create these YouTube videos because I have a family and they're very talkative and they're very full of, energy, and they're always kind of yakking. So for me to be able to create at least the voiceover part, I have to get up super early. What I did here is on the tabouret, you'll see like a yellow pot of paint. That's actually gold. That's Liquitex gold, and I buy it in those big containers because I use a lot of gold. And I was just spatuling on the gold, and then I decided to add some shadow areas with the raw umber, which is very watery. I mixed it up in that plastic container that I have, and it's like a little bit of paint and a whole bunch of water. Why? Because I can kind of carve out better with watery paint over a textured canvas. Like I said, I like the paint, the color, to catch on the textured areas. I think it gives it a really interesting effect, and it's very exciting to create, because those textured areas, you know, are going to grab paint in a way that you have no control over, and that's, to me, the most fun. A little bit of spritzy, and softens that brown a bit. These are kind of like the tree trunks, if you will. Trying not to think too much about it being a wooded area, because I want it to be in the eye of the viewer. I don't want to plant too many seeds of what somebody might envisage. I just want to use those up and down strokes to give the hint of it being kind of a forest scene. Back to that small brush. I didn't use too many tools on this piece. I used this small brush that I'm using now, and one palette knife, maybe two, and then a flat brush, I think, to paint the white sky. So using that thin brush, I'm blending, and be adding a little bit more gold as time goes on. First, have to attend to this side of the canvas and bring in some of the darker shades. I would have dried that area before I applied the gold. I would have used the hairdryer. Once again, I don't show those parts. It's kind of common sense. If you don't dry it and you try to create something like this, you'll see that it does get kind of muddy, and you will, through trial and error, go, oh yeah, I need to have that underlayer dry before I apply the next color, whatever it is. In this case, it's the highlighted gold. Up and down motions for this one. My circle paintings obviously take more circle strokes, but this one is up and down. And now kind of just stepping back, evaluating a little bit. I wanted to add a little more gold because, once again, this was designed as a demo. So I wanted to make sure I had lots of the gold in there so you could see how the canvas takes it. Now I had a little white paint on a paper towel, and I just went in there with my fingertips to kind of fill in, break up some of the heavier parts. This is a teeny tiny spatula, and it's so great for, I'm applying the gold right now, and with the little spatula, it catches all the little nubs and bumps. I think it makes it look super interesting with the finished piece. Okay, and then just fixing up some of the black edging that I applied. Any mistake or any part of a painting that you don't like can just be a small part. Once it's dry, paint over just that small part, and you'll be surprised at how you can control and fix a painting. So I think sometimes we forget it's just paint. It's just paint. So you can walk away, put a painting away in a closet for, it can even be a year, who cares? When you pull it out, you'll be surprised. You'll say, oh, wow, this part of the canvas looks great. I just need to fix it up over on this other side. So yes, pulling down some more of the white, and I think the painting's almost done at this point, but I believe I keep going. Also, earlier in this video, when the painting is more in the gray stage, that would have been another fun place to stop. But my intent was to kind of show some of the different technique. This is a dry brush that I'm just kind of wiping over. And okay, painting's pretty much done, because here I am starting to paint the edges. And I just use a nice, I would say that's 3/4 inch to 1 inch, probably 3/4 inch flat brush. And the reason I don't know all the sizes and kind of the forms of my brushes, because I have so many, and I don't, when I'm doing these, I don't stop to see and measure exactly which brush I'm using. The tool is not that important to me. If you know my work at all, the tool is really not that important. It is all about the color palette and the composition and just free form, get some paint on your canvas. That's how I work. Pouring out a little more of the black paint, coming over to this side. Like I said, if you're getting started, it's probably best for you to mask off the front part of the piece so that you can confidently paint that edge. That's a 1.5 inch edge, but it wouldn't matter if it was a 3/4 inch edge. I use the same approach. So I've been doing it for so many years, it's really easy for me to just quickly paint the edges. But if you're not used to it, mask off. I started masking. I didn't do it freeform. I was nervous about getting too much black on the front of the piece, so I'd mask off one section at a time. And I would actually let the masking, once I pulled the tape off, I'd let the wet side of the tape dry so that I could reuse it. Because you only, think that you put one piece of masking tape down and you paint black, and when you pull it off, only one side of the tape is got paint on it. So then I would let it dry and use the other side. Masking tape is expensive, and also we want to go easy on Mother Earth. Little things count. Okay, very dry brush now, because most of the black went on the edges, and here I am really picking up the highlights now. I should say, letting the textured sections of the piece just naturally get painted darker as you pull a dry brush over. That's exciting. Turning the piece over. This piece will be hung only in one orientation. I know that I had done another video, or maybe it was an Instagram post, where I asked people, which way would you hang this piece? Because it was a pure, non-objective abstract. But in this case, I think it's fairly evident that it's a wooded scene. However, that doesn't mean you couldn't hang it in this orientation if it moved you. I could have kept going in this orientation by dripping paint down with the painting hanging this way. Then we would start to create a whole new piece. It wouldn't be a wooded scene anymore. Well, it might be to some people, but it wouldn't be intentionally a wooded scene. And pulling, kind of dabbing out more paint. You know, I like to keep it real, folks, so you're seeing my real studio, the real paint on the wall, the real messy table, with all kinds of odds and sods, buckets for my brushes to be soaking in. By the way, when I'm done painting a section, I drop my brush into I use milk cartons of water, so the brushes are always wet. And then I pull them out and I dry them. I try not to leave a brush with paint on it sitting on my table overnight, because it's pretty much toast the next day. Although you can use a certain soap, Murphy's oil soap, mixed in with some water, and let your brush soak in that overnight. And oh my goodness, you'd be amazed at how easily you get your brush back within a couple of days. Something about that Murphy's oil soap. It's not really oil. I don't know why they call it oil, but it's just a really nice thick soap that's typically used for like washing cupboards and stuff. Wood. Added a little bit of water because I noticed the paint was drying and I couldn't apply it as nicely as I wanted to, so just thin it with a bit of water, and then just kind of doing the final strokes here, getting really close to the end. Not sure that I like that black edge as much as I thought I would. The white edge might have been more appropriate since the painting is kind of on the darker side. But because it's only paint, everybody, after a couple days I can go back and paint over that edge and make it white. Here's where using gloves comes in really handy, because that edge is still a little wet, but I wanted to turn it over. And then, oh, you see where some of the paint came off where I touched it, so I went in with a wetter brush, black on a wetter brush, just gently stroke over it and clean that up. There we go. Another Margarita Sunrise in the bag, and I hope you give this a try and enjoy. Remember, it's only paint. Thanks for watching.